Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Mendte. The New Jersey legislature is expected to pass legislation that will allow hundreds of New Jersey prisoners to go free early, including violent criminals like murderers. Here's my interview with the New Jersey director of the ACLU, Amol Sinha. Explain what the legislation would do exactly.
So we're working on a bill that hopefully will lead to the release of many people from prison because of the public health emergency that we're in. Right now, we have a situation where New Jersey has the highest rate of COVID-related deaths in its prisons in the country. We've lost dozens of people inside, and we've lost corrections officers and staff who work in prisons as well. And so what we need to do, and we've talked to criminal justice experts and public health experts, everybody says the same thing. What we need to do is find ways to properly self-isolate people so that they can practice social distancing and create opportunities for meaningful social distancing in prison. And the best way to do that is to allow people to leave prison and find places to self-isolate. Now, what we're looking at, the way we structured the bill with our legislative champions and our partners in advocacy, is to allow for the expedited release of people that are going to be out in the next several months anyways. So these are people that are going to be, that are reaching the ends of their sentences. They're no longer going to be in the custody of the state. So we think it makes good sense to not allow these people to languish in prison where they can be further exposed to the virus and bring that back to the communities in a month or two. And instead, expedite the release so that they can get proper medical care, they can properly self-isolate, and they can allow for better social distancing opportunities to people that are left behind bars.
The reporting that I've seen on the legislation says it's 3,000 inmates that you're talking about, and that is 1 in every 5 of the prison population. Are you saying that 1 in every 5 of the prison population are close to the end of their sentencing?
That's right. That's right. There's up to 3,000 people that I believe are eligible for release within the next 8 months, excuse me.
And so it matters not at that point, which is a big deal, as you would know. It's a flashpoint for this. It would matter not that these are violent criminals you're talking about, or many of them are, or at least some of them are.
I mean, these are people that are going to be out in our communities anyways, right? Even if they are people that are accused of violent crimes or convicted of violent crimes, they are reaching the ends of their sentences. If the state saw it just to give them longer sentences, they would have done so. But they are reaching the ends of their sentences, and they're going to be out in communities anyways.
You're with the New Jersey ACLU. The national ACLU has taken an interest in this, right?
Yeah. So we have, I'm in regular touch with our colleagues at National and our colleagues across the country. There has been a lot of information sharing about this legislation, and let me just say that all eyes are on New Jersey for this bill, and hopefully our lawmakers will see that this is not just a life-saving bill, but rather also a legacy-making bill for people who are in leadership right now in New Jersey.
It was fascinating. As I was reading one of the articles, they talked about the hotspots across the country, and the top 10 hotspots were in prisons. And I imagine all those prisons aren't in New Jersey, they're across the country. Right. Is there legislation being worked on elsewhere right now?
I know there's legislation being considered on the federal level related to data collection about who's being affected in prisons and things like that. I know my colleagues
for release.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of efforts. Actually, there have been a lot of states that have done that have released more folks than New Jersey has, including places like Oklahoma and California. And it may not be legislative run efforts, but there have been legal efforts and executive orders that have really helped release people throughout those states.
And New Jersey's released some too. I mean, hundreds in New Jersey. So many states have done that, but it was usually for some low-level crimes. This would be different because of the types of crimes that they are. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understood the difference, that yes, New Jersey has sent criminals out. This would be unique. This would be a first, specifically because it deals with legislation.
Yes, that's right. And this would be a first because it deals with legislation and because it's related to people that are going to be out anyways in the next several months. I think, it's using the time frame rather than, the issue of which crime people have been accused of. And there are carve outs in the legislation. So There's there's a carve out for it wouldn't apply to people accused of repetitive and compulsive sex offenses, and it wouldn't. And there's a clause in the bill that would create no contact orders with victims. So there's things in there for public safety that we think are fine, and hopefully will do the dual goal, serve the dual goal of addressing both public safety and public health.
Is this a one-off, though? I mean, there's no way people could use this for a precedence in the future to get out of jail early.
Right. This applies to this pandemic, but I hope this is a lesson learned, right? Because we are seeing right now, what we knew as the ACLU early on in this pandemic was that was two things. First of all, that it was a racial justice issue, because as we've seen in every institution that the pandemic has touched, it's disproportionately impacted people of color, whether that's healthcare, education, the economy, and definitely the criminal justice system. And second of all, we knew that this was going to hit prisons really hard, because in prisons, it's impossible to socially distance. We know that prisons are designed in a lot of ways to warehouse people, not for physical distancing, but to keep them in close proximity with one another. And we know that things like masks and hand sanitizer and proper protective equipment are not only difficult to come by in prison, but oftentimes people are punished for having those things in prison. And so we knew that this was going to be a challenge for us in prisons. And oftentimes the last place people look, the last people care about are people who are incarcerated. And so we needed to elevate this to make sure that we would address the crisis in prisons, because we knew that unless we eradicate the virus in prisons, we're not going to eradicate the virus on the outside. There are people in prisons that go in every single day, like correction staff, like nurses, that come back to their families every single day. And we've already lost, tragically, several correction staff and a couple of nurses across the state. And we want to make sure that we prevent that, not to mention the lives of the people who are incarcerated.
It's an extremely important point that you're saying, that it's not just about inmates who, for some reason, people don't seem to care enough about unless they know some inmate. But you're saying this affects the general population. This is a bill that will save lives outside of prison, and certainly people that work at the prisons, because that's already happened. Best of luck to you, sir. August 27th. Let's see what happens.
Fingers crossed. Thanks so much, Larry.
Amol Sinha, director of the ACLU in New Jersey. When we come right back, Rutgers has a new study on the effects of news reporting about police violence on students. We'll hear more about it when we come right back.